Enjoy the walk, Olivia. Those words rang out coldly as the sleek SUV vanished into the scorching Arizona horizon, leaving me, a 29-year-old software designer 8 months pregnant, shattered and stranded at a desolate gas station. In that heart-stopping moment, the betrayal of a lifetime unfolded before my eyes. My husband, Brandon, and his demeaning family laughing in unison as they abandoned me in the relentless desert heat. Little did I know, this ruthless act of cruelty was merely the spark that would ignite a battle against a calculated conspiracy. One that sought not only to humiliate me but to steal the very future of my unborn daughter. 3 years ago, if someone had told me I would end up stranded at a gas station, 8 months pregnant, abandoned by the man I once trusted with my life, I would have laughed. Back then, I believed in love, the kind that swept you off your feet and made you feel invincible. And that's exactly how it started with Brandon Carter. We met at a tech conference in San Francisco. I was a rising software designer, passionate about building applications that made life easier, while Brandon was already a well-known name in the industry, a CEO with charm, intelligence, and an empire of wealth to back him up. When he set his sights on me, it felt like a fairy tale. The late-night conversations, the spontaneous weekend getaways, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I thought I had found my forever. But fairy tales are illusions. And I should have seen the cracks forming long before I walked down that aisle. His mother, Victoria Carter, never hid her disdain for me. She ran the Carter Family Foundation, a prestigious charity organization that thrived on exclusivity and status. From the moment we met, she made it clear that I wasn't Carter material. A software engineer, she once scoffed, swirling her wine at a gala. That's cute, but I always thought Brandon would marry someone with more polish. Her daughter, Rachel, was even worse. She had perfected the art of cruelty under the guise of politeness. Like the time she invited me to a casual brunch that turned out to be a private networking event for elite socialites, where I showed up in jeans and a sweater, humiliated among women draped in couture. "Oh, Olivia, you didn't get the memo," she said with a saccharine smile. Must have slipped my mind. Through it all, Brandon stood by my side. At least, that's what I told myself. We got married in an extravagant ceremony that Victoria insisted on planning, ensuring every detail was flawless, except for me. I was the afterthought in my own wedding, overshadowed by the Carter legacy. Still, I believed Brandon was different. That belief shattered the moment I told him I was pregnant. His excitement lasted about a week. Then came the dismissive remarks, the cold indifference, the sudden alignment with his family's cruel whispers. Suddenly, every decision I made was wrong. My morning sickness was overdramatic. My maternity leave plans were irresponsible. And worst of all, my ability to be a mother was questionable. One evening, I overheard Victoria on the phone, her voice low but laced with certainty. "Once the baby is born, we'll make sure she understands her place." I should have run then. Instead, I stayed, convincing myself that I was fighting for my family. I didn't realize until much later that the only battle I was in was the one to survive. Before I share what happened next, the moment that made a room full of reporters go silent in shock, I want to connect with you. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for what you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is far from over. The Arizona sun was relentless, burning into my skin as I stood frozen in disbelief. The sound of their laughter still echoed in my ears, even though their SUV had long disappeared beyond the dusty horizon. My heart pounded, not just from the scorching heat, but from the undeniable truth staring me in the face. They had planned this. This wasn't a cruel joke, a temporary lapse in judgment, or even an impulsive act of anger. This was deliberate. A slow realization crawled through my veins like ice. They didn't just want to humiliate me. They wanted me gone. The gas station was eerily quiet, save for the hum of an old ceiling fan inside the store. I turned slowly, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. My phone, my wallet, even my hospital bag, everything was in that car. A knot formed in my stomach, and for a brief second, I thought it was panic. Then, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. No, not now, ma'am. I turned to see a man standing under the shade of the station's overhang. He was in his 60s, weathered by time but steady in his stance. His piercing blue eyes studied me with concern. Are you all right? I swallowed hard, pressing a trembling hand to my belly. They left me. His jaw tightened. Without another word, he opened the door to the small convenience store. Come inside before you pass out in this heat. I obeyed, stepping into the blessed relief of air conditioning. The man, his name tag read John, grabbed a cold bottle of water from a nearby fridge and handed it to me. Drink this. Slowly, the cold liquid was like a shock to my system, grounding me just enough to think. I took a deep breath, my hands still shaking. I don't have my phone. My husband took everything. John's expression darkened. I saw what happened. That wasn't just abandonment, that was cruelty. He walked behind the counter and tapped on an old security monitor. The screen flickered, revealing grainy footage of what had just transpired. And that's when I saw it. Right before Brandon drove away, Victoria had handed him something, a white envelope. I squinted, my pulse quickening. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A transaction. My blood ran cold. John must have noticed my reaction. That means something to you? I forced myself to focus. Inhaling sharply. I think they're trying to take my baby from me. His gaze sharpened. You mean custody? I nodded. They've been saying I'm unstable for months. What if this was part of their plan? What if leaving me here was supposed to prove something, like I was reckless or unfit? John let out a low whistle. That's sick. He leaned forward. Listen, my station has cameras everywhere. If they think they can get away with this, they're dead wrong. I exhaled shakily, pressing a hand to my belly as another dull pain rippled through me. It wasn't real labor, not yet, but stress was making everything worse. Then, John's phone buzzed. He frowned, looking at the screen. Well, would you look at that? Your husband just posted on social media. He turned the screen toward me, and I felt my stomach lurch. A photo of Brandon, Victoria, and Rachel at a luxury resort. Cocktails in hand, smiling as if nothing had happened. Finally free for a relaxing family vacation. The caption burned itself into my brain. I gritted my teeth, feeling a white-hot rage replace the fear that had been paralyzing me. They think they've won, I muttered. John folded his arms. They think you have no voice, no power. A slow, determined fire ignited in my chest. They're about to find out just how wrong they are. John didn't waste any time. While I tried to steady my breathing, he grabbed the landline behind the counter and made a call. His voice was sharp, laced with restrained anger as he spoke. Hey, Sam, you need to get down here. I've got something you'll want to see. Security footage, full audio. A pregnant woman left stranded in the middle of nowhere by her husband and his family. Yeah, that Carter family. He locked eyes with me and gave a slight nod, as if to say trust me. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I simply watched as his expression hardened. You'll be here in 20? Good. Bring a camera crew. 20 minutes. That was all it took for my story to explode. The news van pulled up in a cloud of dust, and out stepped Sam Reynolds, an investigative journalist known for exposing high-profile scandals. He had the presence of someone who had seen everything, but even he looked disgusted when John played back the footage. The grainy video showed me stepping out of the gas station bathroom, looking around in confusion, then breaking into a desperate run as Brandon's SUV sped away. The worst part wasn't even the visuals, it was the audio. Enjoy the walk, Olivia. Brandon's voice was crisp, filled with mockery, followed by the cruel laughter of his mother and sister. Sam turned to me, shaking his head. This isn't just a personal betrayal. This is national news. By the time the segment aired that evening, the internet had erupted. The headline was brutal. Tech CEO and prominent charity leader abandoned pregnant wife in desert. Security footage confirms heartless scheme. And then, like wildfire, the fallout began. Victoria Carter had been scheduled to speak at a high-profile fundraiser the very next day. An event ironically focused on supporting struggling mothers. She arrived in a designer suit, poised and confident, expecting admiration. Instead, she was met with flashing cameras and a barrage of reporters demanding answers. Mrs. Carter, do you deny that your family abandoned Olivia Carter in the middle of the Arizona desert? Your foundation claims to advocate for women. How do you justify your actions? Are the rumors true that your son was preparing to file for full custody after the baby's birth? For the first time, Victoria faltered. The mask of perfect composure slipped. If only for a second. That footage is misleading, she said stiffly, pushing past the microphones. Olivia has been struggling emotionally. She needed space, and we respected that. But the reporters weren't buying it. Then why was she left without a phone, money, or a way to reach help? The questions kept coming, but Victoria had no answers. She stormed inside, but it was already too late. Within hours, corporate sponsors began pulling their funding from the Carter Family Foundation. Their carefully curated reputation, built on exclusivity, wealth, and elite networking, was crumbling under the weight of public outrage. And it wasn't just Victoria who was feeling the heat. Brandon had underestimated just how fast the internet could turn against him. His company's social media pages were flooded with angry comments, calling for his resignation. Is this the kind of leadership you hire? A man who abandons his pregnant wife. Disgusting. I wouldn't trust this guy to run a lemonade stand, let alone a tech company. Within 24 hours, his board of directors called an emergency meeting. By morning, his position as CEO was under review. And then, the real bombshell dropped. A whistleblower from the Carter Family Foundation leaked internal emails, correspondence between Victoria, Brandon, and a legal team specializing in maternal fitness cases. The emails outlined a calculated strategy: isolate Olivia, paint her as unstable, collect enough evidence to push for full custody the moment the baby was born, and use the family's influence to secure a favorable ruling. It wasn't just a case of abandonment, it was a setup. When I saw the documents, my hands began to shake. Not from fear, but from pure rage. They had never wanted me in their family. They had only wanted my baby. And now, the whole world knew the truth. The outrage on social media had barely begun to settle when an anonymous message appeared in my inbox. Olivia, I can't stay silent anymore. I used to work for Brandon, and I know he's been planning this for a long time. Call me, I have something you need. Attached was a phone number I didn't recognize. My heart pounded as I read the message over and over. Someone inside Brandon's circle had decided to turn against him. I hesitated for only a moment before dialing. A woman's voice answered, rushed but steady. My name is Emily. I was Brandon's legal assistant. I have proof that the Carter family has been plotting to take your baby from you since the moment you announced your pregnancy. My grip on the phone tightened. What are you talking about? Emily took a deep breath. I've seen the contract Brandon signed with a law firm specializing in custody battles. They have been building a case to prove you're mentally unstable, isolating you, and setting up situations to make you seem unfit. It's all in their emails. And I have copies. My pulse roared in my ears as the realization sank in. This wasn't just about humiliating me. This was a carefully orchestrated plan to take my child away. What do I do? My voice shook. Not with fear, but with resolve. Emily didn't hesitate. I'll send you everything. Find a good lawyer, and get ahead of them before they can control the narrative. The moment the call ended, a series of encrypted files appeared in my inbox. As I scrolled through the pages, my stomach twisted in disgust. There were meeting notes detailing Victoria's discussions with lawyers. We need enough evidence to prove Olivia is incapable of raising a child. If she reacts emotionally, document it. Emails from Brandon to a psychiatrist I had never met. My wife is showing signs of extreme stress during pregnancy. I fear for my child's safety. She may not be fit to raise her. He had been building this case from the very beginning. Fury boiled inside me, but I forced myself to stay focused. I immediately reached out to Lauren Pierce, a powerhouse attorney known for taking on high-profile cases against wealthy elites. When I showed her the documents, she didn't even blink. Do you realize what you have in your hands? This isn't just a custody battle. This is systemic manipulation, legal abuse, and coercion. If we expose this, we're not just fighting for you. we're setting a precedent for every woman they've ever tried to silence. That night, in an exclusive interview with a national news outlet, I revealed the truth, sitting under the glaring studio lights. I looked directly into the camera and spoke with a steady voice. They didn't just leave me in the desert. They didn't just try to destroy my reputation. They wanted to steal my daughter. And they've been planning it since the day I told them I was pregnant. By the next morning, the internet exploded again, but this time, it wasn't just outrage, it was action. National news outlets picked up the story, turning it into a discussion on the legal loopholes that allow powerful families to manipulate the system. Women who had gone through similar experiences came forward, sharing their stories. Advocacy groups, lawyers, and even politicians started weighing in. The Carters had always thrived on their influence. But now that influence was working against them. But the real shock came the following evening when I received a call from an anonymous source inside Brandon's law firm. His voice was low, urgent. "You need to hear this. The custody battle was only part of the plan. There's something bigger at play." I gripped the phone. "What do you mean?" A heavy silence. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. "They took out a massive life insurance policy in your name. Olivia, if they won custody of your daughter, and something happened to you after the birth, they'd be the beneficiaries." A wave of nausea crashed over me. My entire body went numb. This wasn't just about winning custody. They were planning for a future where I didn't exist. And if I didn't act fast, I might not get the chance to fight back at all. The moment I hung up the phone, a terrifying clarity settled over me. This was never just about control, this was about eliminating me entirely. The Carters didn't just want my baby. They wanted me gone. They had calculated everything down to the last legal loophole, securing a future where they could raise my child without my existence standing in the way. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. Lauren moved fast. She didn't just file an emergency motion to block any potential custody claims. She took everything to the FBI. The fraudulent legal maneuvers, the manipulation tactics, and most importantly, the life insurance policy in my name. All of it painted a picture of something far more sinister than a bitter custody dispute. This was financially motivated coercion, an attempt to weaponize the legal system against a vulnerable pregnant woman. Within hours, the investigation expanded. The media, already rabid from my interview, latched onto the newest revelation like wildfire. Headlines changed from "Carter family exposed for abandoning pregnant woman" to "Murder plot." New evidence suggests Carters were planning more than just custody battle. Legal analysts debated the severity of the case, while former employees of both Brandon's company and Victoria's foundation came forward with more damning evidence. And then, the first real consequence hit. Victoria Carter was removed as CEO of her own foundation. The board, terrified of the PR disaster, cut ties with her immediately. The very organization that had once been her kingdom, the source of her power and influence, now treated her like a contagion. But the real fireworks came when Brandon showed up on television, attempting damage control, slick and rehearsed. He sat across from a respected journalist, trying to paint himself as the real victim. "My wife has been struggling emotionally during her pregnancy," he said, voice thick with faux concern. "She's been acting irrationally, and we felt she needed time to cool off. The idea that we abandoned her is completely false. She was overwhelmed and chose to stay behind." But before the interview could even finish airing, something happened that no one expected. Lauren had arranged for a live drop of new evidence, directly on national television. As Brandon spoke, the screen split in half, revealing unedited security footage of him and Victoria at the gas station. The clear audio of Victoria handing him the envelope played. "This will make sure she's out of the picture for good," she whispered. The clip cut to Brandon, smirking as he rolled down the window. "Enjoy the walk, Olivia." For the first time since this nightmare began, Brandon looked afraid. The interviewer turned to him, stunned. "Would you care to explain that?" Brandon opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The silence in the studio was deafening. Within an hour, his company's board of directors held an emergency vote. By the end of the night, Brandon Carter was no longer CEO. Stock in his company plummeted overnight. and investors abandoned him faster than he could beg them to stay. But karma wasn't done yet. A former financial auditor from the Carter Family Foundation came forward, revealing massive fraud spanning years. Millions in donations had been misallocated, laundered into personal accounts under the guise of administrative costs. The IRS launched an official inquiry, and within days, the entire foundation was shut down. Victoria, once the untouchable matriarch of high society, now faced criminal charges for fraud and financial misconduct. Cameras caught her leaving her estate, hair disheveled, being escorted into an unmarked federal vehicle. Rachel, the ever-loyal sister, fared no better. Her career, built entirely on her family's influence, collapsed overnight. She lost every brand deal, every social connection. Nobody wanted to be associated with her. She went from elite socialite to persona non grata in less than a week. And Brandon? His fall was the hardest. A class action lawsuit was filed by former employees, detailing a toxic and abusive workplace under his leadership. Old complaints, once buried under hush money, surfaced. Stories of harassment, intimidation, and unethical business practices turned public sentiment against him. And then, the final blow landed. Lauren's legal team secured a full restraining order against him. Any attempt to contact me or my child, ever, would result in immediate legal consequences. Brandon wasn't just losing his business, his reputation, or his freedom. He was losing the one thing he thought he could steal from me. The next morning, I woke up to headlines that felt like justice in its purest form. Carter Empire falls, corruption, fraud, and scandal dismantle one of the most powerful families in America. For the first time in months, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had won. 3 months later, I sat in the hospital, cradling my newborn daughter, Ava, in my arms. She had come into the world 2 weeks early but perfectly healthy, her tiny fingers curling around mine as if she already knew she was safe. The soft hum of the maternity ward was a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed my life not long ago. Now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. The television in my hospital room played a news broadcast. The headline bold and unforgiving: Final sentencing. Victoria Carter faces 5 years in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. A camera panned to her. No longer the composed and powerful woman I once feared, but a shell of her former self. Her eyes hollow as she stood before the judge. Next to her, Brandon's face was just as pale. His once impeccable suit now looked like armor that couldn't protect him anymore. The final ruling stripped him of all parental rights, ensuring that he would never have legal access to Ava again. His empire had crumbled, his name permanently stained, and all that remained of his legacy was a cautionary tale. I had won, but more importantly, I was free. Lauren visited that evening, a rare smile on her normally serious face as she placed a thick envelope on my bedside table. "It's official," she said. "The restraining order is permanent." And I had the judge issue a protective clause. Brandon and his family can't come near Ava, not now. Not ever. I exhaled, holding Ava a little closer. "And the foundation?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Dismantled. Their assets were seized. Their influence is gone. No one in their circle is willing to touch them anymore." She gave a satisfied nod. "You didn't just beat them, Olivia. You erased them." Looking down at Ava, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This was the life they never wanted me to have. A life where I was in control. Where I was the one shaping my daughter's future. Not them. Not their money. Not their manipulations. As the days passed, I settled into my new reality. My story had ignited a movement. One that spread far beyond me. Laws were being reviewed. Discussions about legal loopholes in custody cases had taken center stage. And women across the country were speaking up, sharing their own experiences of coercion and control. What started as my personal nightmare had become a fight for something bigger. 6 months later, I stood before a packed auditorium. Ava's tiny heart beat the steady rhythm against my chest as I held her close in a baby sling. A sea of faces looked back at me: women, mothers, survivors, people who had followed my story, who had seen the power of truth, who had witnessed what happened when one woman refused to be erased. I stepped up to the microphone. My voice strong, unwavering. For a long time, I thought surviving was enough. But survival is just the beginning. The real victory is taking back your power. And when they try to silence you, when they try to break you, you make sure the whole world hears your voice. Applause erupted, but all I could hear was Ava's steady breathing against me. She would grow up knowing that her mother didn't just survive. She fought back, and she won. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about strength, resilience, and taking back control. Olivia was meant to be silenced. But instead, she exposed the truth and shattered the power of those who tried to destroy her. It's a reminder that no matter how much someone tries to manipulate, betray, or erase you, you always have the power to fight back. Now, I want to hear from you. Did this story resonate with you? Drop a 2 in the comments if you liked it, or a 7 if you didn't. And if you believe in standing up for yourself and fighting for justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Your voice matters, let's make sure it's heard.